electrical products. We have been delivering electrical buses for 10 years. Our battery powered trucks and construction machines are already operating successfully around the world, and more are being delivered as we speak. It's no longer about the future. The transition is happening now. Consumers are placing higher and higher demands on sustainability, and transport buying companies are responding. The number of electric trucks and buses on our roads are still small, but the growth rate is fantastic to see. And in 2030, our goal is that 35% of all sold vehicles and machines should be electric globally. Climate change is a complex issue. It encompasses many dimensions, and it is a global problem felt on a local scale. Across companies, industries, countries, continents, we must all work together to meet our common goal. This is the decade for action, and we have the opportunity to make a real difference. But to accelerate the transition to a green platform, we need pace and scale, and we need to act in new ways. As an industry leader, we have an important role to play, but we also need government leaders to support us on this journey. As with many new technologies, costs are initially higher when volumes are lower. There will always be early adopters, but to make important change more widespread, history has shown that different kinds of incentives will be needed. In addition to incentives, we also advocate for the opposite tactic, putting a relevant price on carbon. We see the clear need for a substantial tax on CO2 and carbon pricing. This would create the right conditions for companies to cut their greenhouse gas emissions and adopt clean technologies. As a global company, we also need to ramp up both the production and the distribution of green energy. To electrify transport, having the right infrastructure in place is an absolute prerequisite. But sometimes the debate becomes about what comes first, the chicken or the egg. To move ahead with speed, we have therefore decided to play our part by signing a joint venture agreement with Daimler Trucks and the Traton Group to install and operate a high-performing charging networks for trucks and buses all around Europe, open for all brand. Will this be enough? Absolutely not. It is a start, but we are sending a clear signal that there is no longer time to wait. Environmental care is also about using the world's resources efficiently. Waste and pollution needs to be designed out to the extent possible, and products and materials must be kept in the use phase for a much longer period of time. At the same time, the transport industry in itself can make significant improvements in productivity. Today, estimates shows that an average truck is only using 40 to 50% of its total load capacity, meaning that the possibility to increase efficiency of the transport system is huge. And to truly decarbonize our industry, we recognize that we also need to look beyond the emissions from our own products and consider our entire value chain, including replacement of materials. The steel production is one of the major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. In 2020, 1.87 million tons of crude steel were produced worldwide. 16% of them were destined for the transport sector. With around 70% of a truck's weight from steel and cast iron, replacement of material in our products with fossil-free and recycled alternatives will be another important step in our journey towards net zero. Again, we are moving from words to action. Last week, we announced that we will start using fossil-free steel in our electric trucks. And just 2 days ago, here in Stockholm, we handed over the first articulated hauler built in fossil-free steel to a customer. This demonstrates how we can go from a prototype to customer availability in just 9 months. Volvo Group is one of the founding members of the First Movers Coalition. This again demonstrates our drive to create market demand for low and zero emission alternatives. The new platform will help companies make purchasing commitments for low carbon technologies, critical for accelerating emerging innovations such as fossil-free steel and make them cost efficient for customers. Until now, more than 50 companies have signed up to the First Movers Coalition, together with governments including US, Sweden, India, Italy, Japan, Norway and UK. We have made purchasing commitments to suppliers using near zero or zero carbon solutions in areas of steel, aluminium and trucking. If enough global companies commit to a certain percentage of their purchasing to clean technologies, this will create a market tipping point that accelerates the affordability and drives long-term net zero transformation across the value chain, and particularly across those hard-to-abate sectors such as transport. Climate change is the challenge of our generation. Today, tomorrow, and in the weeks and years to come, we will be judged upon the actions we take. It is both our individual and collective responsibility to move from words to action. So let's work together and commit to accelerate sustainable development across the globe, leaving no one behind, as partnership is the new leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Karin. Would you take a seat?
Sure.
I still have questions to ask. So, I wanted to know, I mean, this is an amazing opportunity, and I'll go off script just a little bit.
Okay.
You talked about the First Movers Coalition. This is really quite innovative. It is taking pace, but is it moving fast enough? And if we try to put like a mark on the time frame, how long would it actually take, do you believe, in order to reach the amazing objectives that you just explained to us now?
In the First Movers Coalition, the First Movers Coalition was initiated at COP26, and I think what makes it so amazing is that it's really a collaboration between governments and industries. And it's also incredible in that way that the companies and the governments there, they are going beyond their own responsibilities. So we are not only making our part, producing electric trucks, for example, but we are also saying that because we are a big buyer of steel, for example, we're a big buyer of transport services, we think we can utilize that purchasing power. And of course, it will take time, but we need to start somewhere. So I think this is a great step, and this is the type of collaboration that we would like to see more of.
Then I'll go back on script and I'll just talk about in the journey to green, in the journey to become more sustainable. What do you think for both big corporations and even smaller corporations, what would be the biggest challenges? And they differ, don't they, between like a global company and something that's a bit smaller, because we'll come back to that later when we talk about, gender and the developing world, and you talked about how to leave no one behind. So in your view, from a global company's point of view first, what are the big challenges?
I think the big challenges for us is that we are present in 190 markets. Our goals are global, so of course we want to make sure that we can do this decarbonization journey everywhere, maybe not at the same time. We usually say that we need to go market by market, region by region, and segment or transport mission by transport mission really to do this. I think for large corporations ours, there are lots of opportunities in that way that we can utilize our global presence. The challenges might then just be that things are moving differently quickly in different parts of the world, and the prerequisites that needs to be in place looks quite differently in different parts of the world. For example, we are it's very important for us with certain things that needs to be in place, like infrastructure, for example, and of course that looks very different. The renewable energy, very, very important for us to be in place. And then, of course, also what I mentioned in my speech here, that we think that many of these technologies, they are a little bit more expensive to start with, so incentives. So of course we need to, as a big organization having customers all over the world, we need to adapt to the different prerequisites around the world.
We heard yesterday from also industry leaders, maybe in other sectors, and one of the things we heard was a call for a harmonization across the world of certain policies or certain trends in order to facilitate the move to a greener kind of path. Is this something that you would encourage? And you find useful?
Of course, it would make things a little bit easier for us. If things look the same all over the world, then of course we're pretty used to the fact that things look differently. But take a thing like a carbon pricing, for example. I think that's a thing that's important to look upon on a global scale. But there are, of course, also other policy areas where it's important that the world moves in the same pace.
Then I'll move to the word opportunity, and maybe I'll take a bit of a different take on it. When large corporations go green and they operate in different parts of the world, do you feel that you offer opportunities to smaller businesses, local businesses, to do better as well?
I definitely think so. And I ended with saying that partnership is the new leadership. Some years ago, we could develop a truck. We could do it ourselves. We developed great trucks. We put them on the market, on the road, and off they went. Today, there are so many things that needs to happen in order for us to be successful. And one of the things that we have been working a lot with the last years is really the small companies, having small and medium-sized companies working together with us. So we think that there is a need to create a whole new ecosystem in order to be successful. And that goes for big organizations, small organizations, but it also goes for us working together with governments and other stakeholders. So I think partnerships and collaboration, and then I'm not talking about us setting demands, but us truly working together with other stakeholders is going to be key for us to be successful. And of course, being a big company, we could sometimes be a little bit slow, and then we can learn from the smaller companies in that respect.
You mentioned several times, and I did too, leaving no one behind as a prerequisite. Do you think by doing what you're doing now, I like the concept of partnership is the new leadership, because then it's calling for more leaders. Maybe if each one of us is more accountable and more empowered, then we can all be better leaders. So in that sense, is that one of the tactics or one of the strategies you have in terms of creating these partnerships with different types of companies in different parts of the world, different sizes, to create the economic system or the action that is required, the environment that is required to leave no one behind, perhaps?
Yeah, and I think that the challenges are so big right now, and that's also a reason why we need to work in partnerships. And of course, in our business, it's important to work close to the customers. So we need to have partnerships in the regions where we want to do things. Then it's going to take a little bit longer in certain parts of the world than in other parts.
We talked innovation, and you've just launched, like everyone know now, the the carbon-free steel products
Yeah.
that you are putting out in the market. And you talked about, the great opportunities that come with this innovation. How challenging is it, or how much of an opportunity is it to really keep innovation at the heart of what you do? What does it take to just keep this vision and also to have the courage? Because when you innovate, sometimes you also take risk, don't you?
Definitely. We can come back to this with taking risk, but I think innovation is something that has been it's been core for a company like ours always. So innovation is what our whole business is built on, you could say. So innovation related to the environment, related to safety, related to efficiency. So without innovation, we wouldn't be there. I think also when it comes to taking risk, it's true, and we need to look upon different paths, of course. So we cannot just put all our eggs into one basket. We need to have different technologies for the future. I think now we are more sure about how we think the future will look like, but of course, taking risk is part of the game. And taking risk is not only about innovation, but taking risk is also related to other areas, like, for example, when we talk about the whole system around for example, electric trucks. So when we talk about the charging infrastructure. And here, once again, we need the partnerships because we need to take risk together. That's also something we feel very strongly about.
I like that. And taking risk, I guess it is part of life, but it's also a science, how you take risk and how you forecast and how you look into the future. And the hope is that in developing the cooperation frameworks that we do and working across the world, and I think maybe we'll talk about that in the next session a little bit, is to how to empower also the smaller industries who are part of the value chain, or to help safeguard a little bit the risk taking in that area. Yeah. Now, you have projects all over the world, and this journey really is about trying to ensure that in the next few years we do deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. So, to wrap up this segment, maybe your vision, in this sense, in order to be able to achieve the SDGs with all the challenges that we have in the world, what is your vision in terms of the 3 actions that you feel could transform what we are doing? It could be on the part of citizens, it could be on the part of government, it could be on the part of the technology sector and industry. From your vast experience in this area, if you would say, these are the 3 things that we could do, maybe we can focus on, because there's so much that we need to do, what would those be?
From our perspective, then I think that we definitely need to work much more on the collaboration. As I said, we think that partnership is crucial. So to find new ways of acting, and that could be unconventional ways of acting. We have, for example, we are now working together with our competitors in certain areas. As I mentioned, we are working together with Daimler Trucks and the Traton Group to build charging infrastructure. I think that's something we wouldn't have thought of some years ago, but because of the challenges being so big, we need to find new ways of cooperating. The other 2 things I think that we need to work on is scale. We need to have these solutions much more common. So we need to see much more of electric trucks, if I take that as an example on the road, which is also part of the solution for some of the less developed countries. If scale goes up, the cost will go down. And then, of course, pace. We need to be much, much quicker in what we do, and we need to dare to take action and not only talk.
You know, I'll have to ask you this now. You decided to go to Daimler and to work with them, and they are one of your biggest competitors in the market. What were you thinking? How did that happen, and how did that conversation go?
I wasn't actually part of that discussion, but I think that large challenges requires new ways of working, and of course we will compete on the market every day. But here we have something that is a crucial prerequisite for both us and the Daimler and the Trotton Group, and then we felt that yeah, this is a good way to go forward.
And what do you aim to achieve together?
We aim to achieve 1,700 charging stations that will be open to all brands, so not only our own brands, but really to create a possibility for our customers to drive electric trucks every day.
This is an amazing thing that competitors come together to build something that would help the planet and help people. So well done for that. Now, we are not through yet. I want to call upon Kuki Pirignani. She is the Director of Partnerships at the Botswana Digital and Innovation Hub, one of the most inspiring new projects in the African continent. It's also my pleasure to invite Dr. Trista Patterson, Director of Gaming Sustainability at Microsoft, to join us. Trista, please come right up. And this is a session that's very close to my heart, and I think it's very, very important, and I'm sure you would share that with us, this thought. We are talking about smashing glass ceilings. We are talking about women leaders in the area of sustainability. And I'll just share with you just a few thoughts from the last climate COP. Trista, welcome.
Hi.
So, at the COP26 Climate Summit, the leaders of Estonia, and we are really pleased to have the Estonian delegation here, Tanzania and Bangladesh, were the first to sign the Glasgow Women Leadership Statement, calling for countries to support the leadership of women on climate action at all levels of society and politics. Yet, these three women comprised nearly a third of all female leaders at the conference, out of 140 heads of delegation. Countries, including the UK, Canada, and the US, pledged to further integrate gender into the climate finance arrangements. While the pledges reflect a growing awareness of gender-responsive finance, which promises gender equality, the amount of money so far mobilized falls well short of what is needed around the world. And just out of interest, a 2019 study found that, for example, national parliaments with more women pass more stringent climate policies, and that access to quality education, gender-responsive policy measurements, and laws against gender discrimination will set a pathway to gender parity in not only climate leadership, but sustainability leadership. So I will really take the opportunity of having the three of you here, and thank you so much for joining us, to talk a little bit business about sustainability and what you do, which is crucial. Your position in the world, the work that you do is so important, but also maybe to touch, as we talk about that, a little bit about the journey of being a woman from different parts of the world in that space. Talking about me, I've been in diplomacy, international diplomacy for so many years, and sometimes I feel frustrated talking about gender because it's not about me being a woman, it's about what I do. So let me start by asking you about what you do, right? And about how you're changing the world from your place in the world. And this is not just talking about corporate here, but it's talking about you and about your journey, about who you are and what you bring. So you can feel free maybe to take off the corporate hat for a few minutes, and then you can put it back on, and it's entirely up to you when and how you do that. So I will start by asking just a few quite off-the-cuff questions. And Kuki, I want to start with you. What are you doing and why do you believe it's important? Tell us a little bit more, because you're doing something quite pioneering, aren't you?
We are. Thank you very much, Shireen. And I'm excited that you asked us to take off our corporate hats before and then put them back on. But I lead commercialization within the Botswana Digital and Innovation Hub. So essentially what I do is I meet innovation with the market. That's what we do. So we incubate, accelerate, and ultimately ensure that commercialization lands in the market, in an African market. And so you can imagine the challenges that come with trying to do that. So that's what I do, commercialization of innovation. But I just want to answer your question on just taking the head off and say this. More often than not, we assume that women know there is a glass ceiling. I didn't know. I mean, I came from a family where my father was a farmer and I didn't know what this man did. Every morning, woke up to a man who stayed home and a woman who went to work. And so I assumed that is how the world should be. But as I progressed, I then got shocked. I was the only woman in the room and I was wondering, why are there no women? What is so wrong? And so I came from a point of privilege because dad sat there, but my mom went to work. And so I didn't have the challenge that other women had. And so for me to begin to understand was also, I guess, the exciting part about wanting women to be there because I didn't have to struggle to be there. And so I've been through mining, I've been through banking, I've been, you name it all. But I had to look around and wonder, why does it feel so lonely? To be a woman in leadership. So this is what I do. But for me, this journey is personal because I didn't know there was a glass ceiling. Yeah.
So what are the tips that you would give to smash some of these maybe layers of glass ceilings that are out there?
My most favorite one is that we want to talk about the technical aspects, which is policy. We want to talk about education. We want to talk about all those things that we've had before. I say this, they need to see us. They need to want to be here. And so networking for women, for me, is more than any policy, any education. We need to tell women that there's a seat for you and you don't need to struggle to get it. And I think that message for me, and yes, I'll talk about all the other harder aspects because we need not be ignorant of them. But it's important that we are role models, we are mentors, but most importantly, show people that it can be done and you don't need to even be aware of that glass ceiling. Yeah.
Well, I'll move to Tristan. I'm coming back where I'll ask you, Cookie, to wear your corporate hat just in a second. But first, let me go to Trista. Trista, you had an amazing journey. You were one of us not too far ago. You know, you were part of our work in the UN system. Then you decided to go to the outside world and to try something that's quite pioneering, gaming. Gaming. And sustainability. So you're charting a very unusual path. It was unusual already when you were in the UN. And we're like, what? Gaming? Why? Who? Who is she? And then before we found out, you were already, already kind of charting a new path in industry. So tell us a little bit about this journey.
Sure. Well, my official title is Director of Gaming Sustainability at Microsoft. And those of you that are familiar with sustainability goals think this is kind of a funny title. My peers tease me all the time because it sounds like I'm gaming, like I'm trying to rig the system and get away with something. So they give me a hard time. I came to gaming as a very reluctant convert. I was quite convinced that gaming and technology was causing a barrier and a rift with the way in which people experience the natural world. And as a consequence of my work as an economist, my conversion to the influence of gaming had everything to do with science and evidence-based decision-making. One of the things that's really important about what Cookie was saying is that when you don't know that there are barriers, you feel free to question what you're told and challenge the system. And that's not always the case for many women and girls in the contexts in which they're raised. And it took me a long time to grow into a place where, even though everyone in my peer group or even my discipline didn't believe that gaming could be something valid and create change and also create positive change, it took me a long time to actually grow into a place where I felt confident to advance the concept, even though I was getting an enormous pushback at the time.
Do you game?
I do. My I do now. I think what I think is important is that gaming is in all of us. We're born playing. We play Ring Around the Rosie, where we are in schools. It's how we learn the fastest. We play is innate to all of us. We all game every day, and that everyone in the audience probably has a game on their phone, whether or not they're aware of it or are incentivized in different ways to do different things that are gamified in interaction. So there's many ways in which gaming comes into our lives that we don't necessarily recognize it. It's one thing if you purchase a big console and put it in your room, but it's another thing when you're encountering gaming on an everyday basis, and that's actually part of the way in which you interact with culture and your peers and your friends, COVID being a great example of how people establish social bonds and now communities also that are very interested in sustainability and environment by gaming.
Well, I'll go back to Karen for a second and then I'll come back. And Karen, you are on the top of your game in the sustainability business at Volvo, one of the biggest companies in the world. To get there, to remain there, and to move forward, how do you feel being a woman in that spaces? I mean, I'll talk again from my experience. I believe we do more. Am I maybe not fair? I don't know. I'm a daughter. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I do try my best, not always very well, to put food on the table while I still have to deliver this big thing. And I still have to go and get that thing done. In terms of your journey, there is that. But then did you feel also in some way any kind of like, it would have been easier if I were a man, or not really, not in this day and age? Maybe we don't go through that in certain parts of the world.
I'm not sure it would have been easier, and it would definitely have been less fun, I think. I actually many times felt like the odd bird in many places. I can go to a conference, and especially then maybe 15 years ago, something like that, I could go to a conference and there were all men and I was the only woman, and I actually enjoyed it in that sense that I stuck out, and that have given me lots of opportunities. And I think I'm maybe a little bit on the same page as you there, saying that I haven't really felt that this was a hurdle for me in any way. Then I can of course understand that for many women this is quite a big issue, and there are structures that makes it difficult for women in many situations. But I have been lucky. And I think also you talk about there are so many other things to do. I'm lucky I have a husband that I'm sharing everything with. So for me, I think it's actually been more of a benefit being a woman than something
I would
else.
have to agree on so many levels. But let me put it that way then. What would you feel like? There is a certain aspect of employment and hiring. We hire, right? You're women in power, you hire people. I really feel upset if I feel I'm getting a job because I'm a woman. So in the hiring process, you will find in the best companies, including in the UN system, you will say, like, we prefer women who are highly qualified. What is your take on this one? Should we hire and put a priority, like there's a woman there, so we should hire her because she's a woman? Or do you feel it should be totally 100% competency-based, regardless of how many women we have on the table? It's one of those difficult things that sometimes you struggle with. So maybe let me start with you, Karen, and then I'll just go the other way.
Competence is not an objective thing. You can't say that this person is competent, this is not competent. Of course, we should choose the best candidate for the work. But because we are more or less 50-50 in the world, men and women, there should be opportunities to find more women, to say it like that. Then, of course, no one wants the job just because you have the right gender. But I think also there could sometimes be good to look upon competence in a broader sense than what we normally do, and that could give us more candidates that are women, and that will also give us a larger base to recruit from.
So empower society, empower being, good at what you do, and try to have like an open mind when it comes to, how we look at employment and recruitment. Trista, maybe your views on that, and maybe your own experience in this.
Let's see. one thing, I agree that competence first and foremost should be the predominant factor. There's no question about that. And certainly in many, many cases, I know so many professional women that are hands down the best candidate for the job. One thing that is oftentimes not considered in this question has to do with the systemic bias that exists in the system. And bias exists in all of us based on the culture in which we're raised, the people in which we are around, the conversations we have. Some of that bias we can be aware of and we can control it. We can take trainings and we can learn to do things differently. Other things, they are societal. They can be subconscious. They can be instinctive. And as a consequence, those things, when they build up in the system, tilt the system so that those that have the most competence aren't recognized in the system, and it makes it very difficult to award a job to the person that actually has the most competence. And it's those kinds of situations. I've been pretty impressed coming from a UN-based system to Microsoft, because there's so many trainings that they're not just the flip through, click through PowerPoint type of trainings, but they make television series about subconscious bias and security and privacy and these kinds of things that play out kind of like a television show, help you identify with empathy with different situations. And when you begin to do that, you can begin to question your own recruitment schemes, or even the way in which you're looking at a resume that comes across your desk, or ask better questions of their employees, or ask questions of different audiences to recommend more people with more kinds of diversity. And it's not just gender diversity. It can be neurodiversity is obviously a really interesting area, because there are so many genius, bright people that have been misinterpreted by the system because neurologically they differ from others. And so this is an enormous area of talent acquisition that is kind of an unturned stone. And I would argue the same is true for gender equity.
It looks to me like this is a topic that we will have to officially put into our program of work, under the UN Science Policy Business Forum. And what a great opportunity. We have leaders, both men and women, from science, from policy, from business, and obviously from society that could help us take this across. Now, my last question on this segment, and there's so much to be done, so again, I'll say to be continued, but Kuki, you are in a position of leadership. You are leading work in a very innovative new hub in Botswana, and we always talk about Africa. Africa is a huge country, very diverse continent with so many different countries. I'm from there, you're from there, and we come, from different cultures and backgrounds and all that. But being in this position of privilege as well, being the leader in a very new and hopefully very innovative space, what will you do? What are the things that you want to do to ensure that there is balance, there is empowerment? And I'm really impressed with what Trista is saying, in terms of creating the training. We don't get I didn't get trained, for example, enough, in terms of how to stand there and we had to learn by doing. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Three things for me, Shireen, that are very important that we as the Botswana Innovation Hub, and indeed myself, are leading aspects that we need to ensure that we touch and make right. Because like she said, we shouldn't be ignorant of the fact that there are inequalities, and therefore there should be targeted interventions to ensure those are addressed. And then we can begin to say, let's be focused on competencies, let's not have quotas, let's not have... Three things for me: education. I say this coming from Africa, access to education is absolutely key. And we should be deliberate ensuring that STEM and research becomes very attractive to women, because only when they can compete at that level, we can then begin to talk about competency. So that's the first thing for me, education. Secondly, access to funding. In the entire conversation, I think I've heard there's so much money. Money is not the problem, but we need to channel it right. We need to ensure that we channel money to innovation so that we can then accelerate and ensure that we then help the planet, which is, by the way, not about the planet because it knows how to heal itself. It's about humanity, and so we need to ensure that funding is directed accordingly. But most importantly for me, we're a government agency, although we operate as a private company, as policy shift. And policy shift for me is in two folds: ensuring that we have the right policies to address equality, but secondly, to ensure that there are more women participating in policy making. Because we can only get there if we have equal representation in terms of thoughts and views, in terms of policy development. So for me, absolutely critical. If we can do those three, which we are lobbying for, and fortunate enough, Botswana has developed the new smart board strategy, which we adopted in 2020, that talks about leaving no one behind, is talking about innovation and technology, is talking about also transitioning into a knowledge economy. And so as facilitators or as an agency that then lobbies for the entire ecosystem to rally behind that, I think those are the areas that we will champion and indeed as a leader speak so loudly about, to ensure that we get to a point where we can then talk about equality, and then we will see innovation and technology will no longer recognize gender.
Thank you very much. I'm thanking the three of you very much, Karen, Trista, and Cookie, but we're not done just yet. I would like to end this session, and I promise everyone that this is not only to be continued, but I think this is the beginning of, at least within the context of the forum, taking this up and trying to really address it from a point of power. We have so many women in power, but this is not only just about women. This is about gender. This is about justice. This is about equality. And I think we all have a role to play. And I think we are strong enough to do it and to make things happen. But let me invite Salma Bishbish. And Salma is from Algeria. She represents the youth of the world. She's been nominated by the youth groups here at the United Nations. And she will share with us her take on Stockholm+50 so far. She will say something about climate finance, I imagine, because it's one of her passions. And she's a voice for the future. And it is their world, and we just live in it. So please, Salma, take it away.
Right, so am I audible? All right, awesome. Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. This is Selma Bishbish. I'm from Algeria. Well, I'm actually speaking on behalf of my of the major group of children and youth and my organization, maybe Together for Blue and Green. Well, basically, I'm gonna kick this off by saying, you know, traveling from all over the world and then drafting recommendations and policies and interventions till 4 a.m., then having strikes, then like saying all one word, planet for all, then just being exhausted from all of that was all made for a reason, which is making the Stockholm event all successful. And we're all insisting on one thing. Well, yes, we want to see recommendations turned into real actions. And yes, we want to see every single work we have crammed the night for being implemented and seen on the ground. We would love to see youth being more empowered and seen as current leaders before future ones. We want to see new green and blue programs that we have already highlighted before in the leadership dialogues, both online and offline. Of course, we will not neglect any of the work that we had before that, which was months ago, preparing for this big days, I would say, big days. Having us more involved and trusted the ideas, trusting the ideas and the projects we are trying to bring to the floor, especially that we are insisting on what we're insisting on is a new world that will not only we will not only be the leaders for, but also for the upcoming generations who are expecting us to do a lot for them. We need new opportunities in the regions, and this was highlighted a lot, especially when having this side events in here, where we talked about why having sometimes the global but like having the global south neglected and excluded from such opportunities, where we're not having their voice heard all time. We want to have more cooperations between the global south and the global north. And we hope we will be more trusted on leading this cooperation as youth. As I said before, and as I'm gonna always insist on, we will be creating the new UN that is all led by youth. With our energy, with our being crazy and just being youth and doing our thing, because we know that we are on the ground and we're seeing what is lacking and we're just acting more than speaking and making promises. So it's us who know what is happening, and it's us who knows what's the perfect solution for this planet. We want to see people from countries of force and crisis always remembered, which is something that we have highlighted before in the side events that I'm so thankful that I have been trusted to lead and to organize under the Human Rights Working Group of Yongo. And the fact that seeing everyone, both from the global north and the global south, talking and insisting how we can help as support, as youth, how can we support and how we can just bring more change to these communities, especially activists who are struggling more than us when advocating for climate change. So I would love to end it as saying we are worth it to trust and to give us the floor to show you what we got, because we are the ones fighting on the ground and know the challenges that are affecting humans the most. And again, empowering youth is the best investment any government can ever make. And this was highlighted not only here, and this is not a message that I'm sending in here, but everyone is insisting on, and we will be building that future that we are aiming for. Thank you so much. I hope
Thank
I
you
was
very much, Salma. That's very strong words, and a lot of leadership, and go girl. So I am way beyond time, but I think you've got this. So, and I'm sure you'll have lots of support from all of us as you go on your journey. Maybe I can take one question from the floor. Okay, let's go over there. Gubin? I think we'll need to give him the microphone.
Shireen, while the microphone is moving around, I thought that it was important to remind the audience that there's 600 million adolescent girls in the world, and over a quarter of them do not attend school. So for every 7 years of education, they marry 4 years later. For every additional year of education after that, they earn 25% more per year. So it's one of those things where education is such a crux issue for youth and for the planet's future. And there are so many different ways in which the causal relationship between adolescent girls getting the education and empowerment they need, the tooling, the STEM training, the networking, and then the peer support, that's where the basis of the engine of sustainability will come from.
Absolutely, and in this day and age to know, and we hear it in the news, we see it, that inequalities at that scale exist now, and how peace and security is very important in this, how sustainability will definitely be one of the casualties, just one of the casualties of this. It is definitely a big message, and it resonates, I think, the message from this panel. I think we have to conclude, and very quickly, just one final comment from the floor.
Hi, thank you, Shireen. So I'm Gibbon from the Children and Youth Major Group, and again, thank you to the SPBF for facilitating youth engagement through the past few days and the past 2 years, really. But it's one corner of the UN system, and my question to the panelists and to Shireen is, what is the rest of the private sector doing to engage young people in the decision-making and the rest of the UN system as well?
Say that again, please.
So what's the rest of the private sector and the UN system doing to engage young people, not just the SPBF?
I'll take it very quickly. Honestly, 30 seconds. What are you doing to engage youth and major groups?
Well, because we're an innovation hub, we're a youth center. And so that's what we do, engagement with youth all the time. But I was going to say, one of the speakers said something, and unfortunately I can't remember his name, something very profound yesterday. He said, we must remember that we'll not be there in 50 years. And so this is not our conversation to have. We need to ensure that we then hand over the conversation to the youth. And so it's important that all other youth organizations or organizations that are youth conscious should remember they will not be there in 50 years. And so our pledge as the Innovation Hub, because we deal with youth, is that we're handing over the baton so that they can begin the conversation. And so we are asking them to ask us to tell us what they want, and that is our commitment.
And you can come back to us. We are here as well. We have access to them. Just come back to us. We will facilitate that. Trista, 30 seconds, quickly. They are, see, yeah.
I agree with you. And the idea of a new United Nations made of youth sounds like an amazing idea to me. So whatever I can do to facilitate on the part of Xbox to make that happen within Minecraft or any of the other platforms we have to do it within a virtual environment, because it won't be Web 3, it'll be Web 7 or Web 8 by the time the Stockholm+100 happens. So hopefully that will create a more inclusive environment.
Yeah, I'll end with what I ended for before, that partnership is the new leadership, meaning that we will have to work together with all groups in society, including youth.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's actually where we're looking for as well. Having just corporations with the Global South and the Global North, having no one neglected, that's actually what we're insisting on the most. People of crisis, people of countries of crisis and countries of force, and everyone who are struggling and having troubles and having their voice heard. We need all to be for them, and then we will take it to actions, because to be honest, we're all sick of words and we're sick of promises, and we want to see things on the ground, and that's what we are aiming for, starting from the scope.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, and let's look forward to working towards Stockholm+100. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.